Hello. I met Anna during my final year of college. I was 22, juggling my finance degree with a part-time job at a gas station, and she was 21, studying marketing while working as a sales assistant at a clothing boutique. We met at a mutual friend's party, one of those cramped, loud college get-togethers where cheap beer flowed freely, and the music made it impossible to have a real conversation. But somehow, amidst the chaos, Anna and I found each other. She had this effortless charm, the kind of presence that made people lean in when she spoke. I remember she had a way of making even the most mundane things sound interesting. We started dating soon after, and from the very beginning, I could tell she was different. She wasn't just ambitious, she was hungry. She had this fire in her, this constant desire for something more. While most of our friends were just trying to get through the week without failing a class or missing rent, Anna was already planning her future in vivid detail. She wanted success, luxury, the kind of life that most people only saw in magazines. She talked about penthouse apartments, designer wardrobes, high-profile clients. I used to joke that she sounded like the protagonist of some over-the-top drama series, but I admired her drive. Despite her big dreams, she never looked down on where we were at the time. Some of my best memories are from those college years, late-night study sessions that turned into deep conversations about life, cheap date nights where we'd split a single burger and laugh about it, dreaming about where we'd be in 10 years. We both wanted something bigger than the life we had, but we believed we'd build it together. When we graduated, things moved fast. I landed a job at a mid-sized investment firm, and she started working for a fashion retailer. We weren't making a fortune, but we were comfortable. We got married a year later in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. It wasn't the extravagant wedding Anna had once imagined, but at the time, she didn't seem to mind. She said it was about us, not the spectacle. I believed her. Marriage, at first, was everything I had hoped for. We worked hard, saved money, made plans. I took on extra hours to get promotions, and Anna was climbing the ranks in her company, impressing everyone with her ability to sell not just a product but an image. I was proud of her. She had always been the kind of person who could walk into a room and command attention, but now she was turning that natural charisma into a career. At the end of the day, no matter how exhausting work was, we always made time for each other. Whether it was cooking dinner together, watching some mindless reality show, or just lying in bed talking about our future, I felt like we were still the same people we had been in college, two young dreamers, figuring life out together. Back then, I truly believed that nothing could shake what we had. As the years passed, life became a balancing act between ambition and routine. I worked tirelessly, taking on more responsibilities at the firm, pushing for promotions, and making sure our financial future was secure. Anna, in turn, was excelling in her field. She had moved from marketing into high-end brand management, working with luxury clients and attending glamorous events. She loved her job, and I loved seeing her succeed. We had moved into a nicer apartment, one with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. It wasn't the penthouse she had always dreamed of, but it was a step closer. Anna decorated it with the same precision she put into everything. Every piece of furniture, every art piece, every detail was carefully curated. She had a taste for refinement, for things that exuded class and exclusivity, and I was happy to provide for her. But as much as we were growing in our careers, I started to notice how little time we were actually spending together. My work schedule had me pulling late nights, and Anna's industry kept her constantly social, dinners, networking events, fashion shows. It wasn't unusual for her to come home late, exhausted but exhilarated, telling me about the incredible people she had met, the brands she was working with, the circle she was now a part of. I was proud of her, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the distance creeping in. Weekends that were once spent lounging in bed or taking spontaneous road trips turned into silent mornings where we were both too drained from the week to do much of anything. Conversations became shorter, mostly revolving around work, schedules, and future plans. The intimacy we once had, the effortless connection, started to feel more like something we had to pencil into our calendars. I told myself this was just a phase, a natural consequence of two people chasing success. We were still young. We had time. And once we had finally made it, once we had everything we had worked for, we'd slow down. We'd find our way back to the way things used to be. But deep down, there was a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. Anna had always been driven, always had high expectations for what she wanted in life. But now, there was an impatience in her that hadn't been there before. She wasn't just working toward success. She was chasing it at a speed I couldn't keep up with. The nights she spent at events became more frequent. Her enthusiasm for our quiet moments at home seemed to dwindle. I reassured myself that it was just stress, just part of the journey. After all, we had been through everything together: college, the struggles of starting out, the sacrifices we had made to get here. Anna was my wife, my partner. We had built this life side by side. I refused to believe that anything could come between us. I had no idea that something already had. Looking back, the signs were there long before I acknowledged them. At first, they were small things: changes in routine, a shift in Anna's demeanor, little details that seemed insignificant in isolation. But together, they painted a picture I was too blind to see. It started with her schedule. She had always worked long hours, but now it felt excessive. She had more networking events, more last-minute meetings, more unexplained late nights. I told myself it was just her career taking off, that this was the price of ambition. I even encouraged her, reassuring her that I understood how demanding her industry was. After all, I was working late too. Then, there was her phone. She had never been secretive before. If anything, she used to leave it lying around, unlocked, without a second thought. But now, it was always with her. She started turning it face down whenever she was home, and I noticed her texting more often, sometimes smiling at messages she never bothered to share with me. When I asked, she brushed it off. Just work, she'd say. And I believed her. She also started paying more attention to her appearance. Not in the usual way she always had, but something more deliberate. New outfits, more frequent salon visits, expensive perfumes that she never used to wear. When I complimented her, she would smile, but it felt distant, as if my validation wasn't the one she was looking for. Still, I convinced myself that I was overthinking it, that I was just stressed, exhausted, imagining things that weren't there. We had been together for so long, built so much. Why would she ever risk that? But the doubt lingered. One night, I stayed late at work, trying to finish a project for a client. It was well past midnight when I finally left the office. On my way home, I realized I hadn't heard from Anna all evening. Normally, she would at least text, even if she was out at an event. But my phone had been silent. When I got home, the apartment was empty. No lights on, no note, nothing. I called her, and it rang several times before going to voicemail. I sat in the dark, waiting. Minutes felt like hours. She finally came home around 2 a.m. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her makeup less polished than usual, and there was something off in the way she carried herself, like someone trying too hard to appear normal. She seemed surprised to see me awake. "Work ran late," she said casually, kicking off her heels and walking straight to the bathroom. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to tell myself that she was telling the truth. But deep down, something inside me had shifted. For the first time, I let the thought in. What if she wasn't just working late? Once the suspicion took hold, it was impossible to ignore. I tried to push it down, to reason with myself, but it kept gnawing at me. The late nights, the secrecy, the way she avoided my eyes when she answered simple questions. It was all too much to be coincidence. I started paying closer attention. I wasn't proud of it, but I began noticing things I had once ignored. Anna's routine had changed in ways that didn't add up. She started dressing up even on days when she had no formal meetings, putting more effort into her appearance before leaving the house. She was always on edge when I asked about her day, offering vague answers or changing the subject quickly. And then there was the biggest red flag of all. She had started avoiding intimacy with me altogether. Before, even on our busiest days, there was always some level of affection between us. A kiss, a lingering touch, a quiet moment in bed. But now, it felt like she was a stranger living in the same space as me. When I reached for her at night, she would shift away, claiming exhaustion. If I asked if something was wrong, she would sigh and tell me I was imagining things. I told myself to trust her. That was what marriage was built on, wasn't it? Trust. But trust only works when both people are honest. And I was beginning to wonder if Anna had already broken our vows in ways I couldn't yet prove. The moment of truth came in the form of something seemingly small, an Uber receipt. One evening, as she was in the shower, I saw her purse sitting on the kitchen counter, her phone screen lighting up with a notification. I wasn't looking for proof, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the message. "Thank you for riding with Uber. Your trip from, hotel name, is complete." A hotel. Not an office. Not a restaurant. A hotel. I felt my chest tighten, my breath slow. I checked the timestamp, midnight. The same night, she had come home late, claiming to be at a networking event. I put her phone back where I found it and sat at the dining table, staring at nothing. My mind raced through every possibility, every excuse I could give her, every way I could try to justify what I had just seen. But no matter how I spun it, no matter how much I wanted to believe otherwise, there was only one conclusion. Anna was cheating on me. The reality of it didn't hit me all at once. It settled in slowly, like poison spreading through my veins. I felt sick. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand answers. But what would that accomplish? She would lie. She would twist the truth. She would make me feel like I was crazy. No, I needed more than a hunch, more than a single notification. I needed the full truth. And I was going to get it. I felt like a man walking through quicksand. The more I tried to pretend everything was fine, the more I felt myself sinking, unable to breathe, unable to think of anything but the growing suspicion that my wife, the woman I had built my life with, was lying to me. Ever since I saw that Uber receipt, my mind had been caught in a relentless loop. It was so clear now, her changed routine, her sudden secrecy, the way she was slowly pulling away from me while pretending nothing was wrong. Every moment we spent together felt like an act, a carefully curated performance where she played the devoted wife, and I played the fool who was supposed to believe it. I started to test her. Small things at first. I casually asked about her last networking event, watching her face closely as she spun a version of the night that I already knew was a lie. I paid attention to her schedule, the way she seemed to come home just late enough to make me second-guess myself, but never so late that it raised outright suspicion. She was careful, calculated. She knew exactly how to cover her tracks, just enough deception mixed with the truth to keep me from seeing the full picture. But I saw it. It was in the way she hardly touched me anymore. The way she barely reacted when I kissed her goodbye in the morning, as if it were nothing more than an obligation. The way she was always looking at her phone, her fingers typing quickly before locking the screen whenever I entered the room. I started checking small details, her perfume, the way her hair was styled when she left versus when she came home. I paid attention to the little inconsistencies, the changes in her habits that she thought I wouldn't notice. And then there were the excuses. My meeting ran late. My boss needed me to stay and help with a last-minute project. I had to grab a drink with some colleagues. It was important for networking. Every excuse sounded reasonable on the surface. But now, they felt like rehearsed lines, perfectly crafted to keep me in the dark. I told myself I needed real proof. I couldn't let paranoia cloud my judgment. Maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. Maybe I was letting stress and exhaustion get the best of me. Maybe I was imagining all of it. But then, something happened that shattered any remaining doubt. One night, Anna came home later than usual. She looked tired but energized in a strange way, like someone who had just come back from an exciting evening rather than a draining work event. She kissed me on the cheek absent-mindedly, dropped her purse on the counter, and went straight to the shower. As she closed the bathroom door, I heard her phone vibrate. It was still in her purse, the screen lighting up just enough for me to see the preview of a message. Had a great time tonight. Can't wait to see you again. No name. No contact photo. Just a number. I stared at the message, my pulse pounding in my ears. My fingers twitched with the urge to pick up her phone, to scroll through her messages, to rip the truth out of her carefully guarded secrecy. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching the screen go dark, feeling something inside me break. I didn't need to read the messages. I didn't need to go through her call logs or interrogate her. I already knew. I just didn't know how I would find out the full truth. But I would. And when I did, there would be no coming back from it. The more I watched Anna, the clearer it became. Our marriage was nothing more than a carefully maintained illusion. She still played the role of the devoted wife, still smiled at me over breakfast, still asked about my day, as if she cared. But it was all a performance, a script she was following, hoping I wouldn't notice the cracks forming underneath. And for a while, I let her believe I was fooled. I stopped asking questions about her late nights. I stopped pressing when she gave vague answers. I even forced myself to act normal, to hold her, to pretend that I didn't feel the distance between us like an open wound. If she was hiding something, I needed her to believe I was blind to it. I needed her to feel comfortable enough to slip up. But it wasn't easy. Every night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling while my mind ran through every possibility. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Was it someone from work? A stranger? Was it physical, or had it started as something emotional first? The questions tortured me, looping in my head like a cruel joke. She had no idea that every time she left the house, I was paying attention. I checked her perfume bottles to see which ones she was using. I memorized the outfits she left in and compared them to how she looked when she came home. I took note of her energy, how some nights she came home exhausted and distant, and others she had a glow, a quiet satisfaction she thought I wouldn't recognize. Then, there were her work events. She started dressing differently for them, more effort in her appearance, more time spent getting ready. Her excitement for these meetings felt forced when she told me about them, like she was reciting a rehearsed speech rather than casually explaining her night. But the biggest confirmation came in the form of something so simple, so small, that she never even considered it might betray her. One night, as she stood by the mirror applying her makeup, I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "You look beautiful," I said, keeping my voice steady. She smiled at me through the mirror, but it was different. Not the kind of smile she used to give me. It was the smile of someone who had already checked out, someone who was playing along because it was easier than confronting reality. That was when I knew for certain. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was in love with someone else. And soon, I would find out exactly who it was. I had been living in the shadow of doubt for weeks, trapped between suspicion and the desperate hope that I was wrong. But the moment I had been dreading, the moment I had tried to prepare myself for, came when I least expected it. It was a Friday evening. I had stayed late at the office, going through reports, anything to distract myself from the thoughts that had been consuming me. Most of my colleagues had already left, the office floor eerily quiet except for the occasional hum of the air conditioning. As I made my way toward the elevator, I passed by the security desk. Mr. Langley, the night guard, was sitting there, rubbing his temples like he had a headache. He was an older man, had worked there for years, always friendly in a quiet, observant way. "Rough night?" I asked, forcing a small smile. He looked up at me, hesitation flickering across his face. Then, as if deciding something, he sighed. "You got a minute, sir?" I frowned but stepped closer. "What's up?" Langley glanced around, making sure we were alone, then lowered his voice. "I don't like getting involved in people's business, but I think there's something you should see." A strange, cold sensation settled in my gut. "See what?" He hesitated again, then turned the monitor toward me. The screen displayed security footage, grainy, black and white, time-stamped from 2 nights ago. It was the camera feed from the executive conference room. And there she was, Anna, my wife. She was sitting on the edge of the conference table, her dress slightly hiked up, her hands resting on the shoulders of the man standing between her legs. He was leaning in, whispering something in her ear, his hands gripping her thighs. Even in the poor resolution, I could see the way she smiled, the way she looked at him with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Then he kissed her. "Richard Caldwell, my boss." The room around me faded. I heard Langley saying something, but the words didn't register. My pulse was hammering in my ears, my hands clenched into fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. There it was. The truth. Not a suspicion. Not a theory. Not paranoia. Undeniable. Unforgivable. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was doing it in my workplace, with my boss, the man who held power over my career, my future. The humiliation, the betrayal, it was deeper than I could have ever imagined. I forced myself to look away from the screen, exhaling slowly, trying to suppress the rage that was threatening to consume me. Langley was watching me carefully, his expression unreadable. "You okay, sir?" he asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Yeah," I said, even though I wasn't. "Yeah, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was done, and it was time for them to pay. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was blank and racing all at once, filled with nothing but the image of Anna with him, my boss, in my office, doing the very thing I had been too much of a fool to see coming. Every doubt I had ever entertained, every excuse I had tried to believe, every shred of hope that maybe I had been imagining things, it all burned away, leaving nothing but rage in its place. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my heart was pounding, but my mind was eerily calm. The house, our house, the one I had worked to build for us, now felt tainted, poisoned by her betrayal. I sat there for a moment, breathing slowly, collecting myself. Then, I stepped out of the car and walked inside. Anna was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like it was any other evening. She didn't even look up when I entered, just muttered a casual, "Hey, you're home late," as if nothing had changed. As if she wasn't stabbing me in the back every chance she got. I stood in the doorway, watching her, feeling something inside me harden. I could have confronted her right then and there. Could have thrown the truth in her face and watched her scramble for excuses. But that wasn't enough. Words wouldn't be enough. I wanted her to feel what she had done. I wanted her to know that this wasn't just some mistake she could cry her way out of. She had destroyed everything, and now I was going to burn down every last piece of the life she had built with me. Without a word, I turned and walked upstairs. I grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing her clothes inside, moving with a sense of purpose that almost felt mechanical. Every dress, every pair of shoes, every expensive handbag she had convinced me to buy over the years, I tossed them all in. Then I went to the bathroom, gathered up her makeup, her perfumes, every little luxury she had surrounded herself with, and threw them on top. When the bag was full, I dragged it downstairs and dropped it at her feet. She looked up at me then, finally sensing that something was wrong. "What are you doing?" she asked, her brow furrowing as she set her phone down. I stared at her for a long moment, then spoke, my voice cold and steady. "Get out." Her eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me," I said, stepping closer. "Get your things and get the hell out of my house." She let out a breathy, nervous laugh. "Okay, what's going on? Why are you acting like this?" I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay in control. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of an argument. "I know, Anna," I said simply. "I know about you and Richard." The color drained from her face. For a split second, she just stared at me, her mouth slightly open as if searching for words. Then, just like I had expected, she went into damage control mode. "Wait, let me explain," she started, pushing herself up from the couch. "It's not what you think." But I was already walking past her. "I don't care," I said. "You made your choice, and now you get to live with it." I grabbed the duffel bag, walked to the front door, and threw it outside onto the porch. Then I turned back to her, my expression blank. "Take your things and go." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, nothing but the cold satisfaction of watching her world crumble. "Please," she whispered, stepping toward me. "We can talk about this. We can fix it." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "There's nothing left to fix." And then, without waiting for another word, I opened the door, stepped back, and gestured for her to leave. She stood there for a moment, frozen in place, like she couldn't believe this was actually happening. But it was. She had spent so much time thinking she was untouchable, so sure that I would never find out, never take action. She was wrong. Finally, with a shaky breath, she picked up the bag and stepped outside. She turned to look at me one last time, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry," she choked out. I met her gaze, expressionless. Then, without another word, I slammed the door in her face. The moment the lock clicked into place, I exhaled slowly, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. She was gone. The weight of her lies, her betrayal, the years of pretending, it was all gone. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more person who needed to pay. Throwing Anna out of my house wasn't enough. She had lost everything she had with me, but the man she had risked it all for, a Richard Caldwell, still had everything. His career, his reputation, his marriage, his comfortable, perfect life. That was about to change. I spent the night thinking about what I wanted, what would actually hurt him. I didn't want a screaming match in his office, didn't want to take a swing at him in front of our colleagues. That would be too easy, and men like Richard always found a way to land on their feet. No, I wanted something that would stay with him. Something that would unravel his carefully constructed world the way he had unraveled mine. And that's when it hit me, his wife. I had met Vanessa Caldwell a handful of times. She was everything Anna had always wanted to be: elegant, sophisticated, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people feel like they had to prove themselves to her. She was sharp, intimidating in a way that wasn't loud but still demanded respect. And most importantly, she was loyal. The type of woman who had built a life with her husband, who had stood by him while he built his empire, believing he was the man she thought he was. She deserved to know the truth. And if Richard wanted to take something from me, I was going to take something from him. The next evening, I put my plan into motion. I found Vanessa's number in an old company contact list and sent her a message. "We need to talk. It's about your husband. I have proof he's been cheating on you." I expected her to ignore me, maybe even block my number. Instead, I got an immediate response. Where? No hesitation. No disbelief. Just a single word that told me everything I needed to know. She had suspected something for a long time. I sent her the address of a high-end hotel bar in the city, the kind of place where people met in secret, where privacy was respected. She agreed to meet me there an hour later. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a secluded booth, a glass of red wine in front of her. She didn't look fragile, didn't look like a woman on the verge of breaking down. She looked composed, collected. But when I sat down across from her, I could see it, the flicker of anger just beneath the surface, the tight grip on the stem of her glass. Tell me, she said, skipping any pretense. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was the security footage, the one of Richard with Anna in the office, his hands all over her, his mouth on hers. I watched as Vanessa's expression didn't change, but I saw the way her breath hitched, the way her fingers tightened around the glass. She watched the entire thing without a single word. Then, finally, she set the phone down, exhaling through her nose. How long? I don't know exactly, I admitted. But I suspect months. Maybe longer. She nodded slowly, taking another sip of wine, as if she were processing something far bigger than just the video. What do you want? She finally asked, looking at me for the first time with genuine curiosity. I leaned back, taking my time before answering. Revenge. Her lips curled into the smallest smirk, a dark amusement flashing in her eyes. Good, she murmured, swirling her wine. So do I. The next thing I knew, we were in a hotel suite upstairs. Maybe it was the anger, maybe it was the betrayal, or maybe it was just the simple, raw need to feel something other than pain. But that night, I spent the hours taking from Richard what he had taken from me. And when the sun rose the next morning, I left without a word. But I knew one thing for certain. When Vanessa confronted Richard, when she tore his life apart the way Anna had torn apart mine, he would finally know what it felt like to lose. The morning after, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, satisfaction. Not happiness. Not peace. But a sense of balance, like I had finally tipped the scales back in my favor. I didn't regret what I had done with Vanessa. I wasn't naive enough to think it was anything more than what it was, revenge, plain and simple. Two people, both betrayed, both looking for a way to reclaim some part of themselves. She had gotten what she wanted, and so had I. But the real satisfaction came later that afternoon when I got a message from one of my coworkers. Holy shit. Did you hear about Richard? I already knew what had happened before I even replied. Vanessa had played her hand. When I arrived at the office, the tension was palpable. People were whispering in corners, stealing glances at Richard's office, the blinds drawn shut. The energy in the room was electric, like everyone knew something massive had just gone down, but no one wanted to be the first to say it. I didn't have to wait long for confirmation. By lunchtime, an email came through from HR. Effective immediately, Richard Caldwell is no longer with the company. I smirked to myself, imagining how it must have played out. Vanessa wasn't the kind of woman to throw a fit or cry in silence. No, she would have destroyed him. Maybe she threatened to ruin his reputation. Maybe she made it clear she would take him for everything in the divorce. Maybe she simply made sure that everyone in his professional circle knew exactly what kind of man he was. Either way, he was done. And Anna? I hadn't heard from her since the night I threw her out. No pleading messages, no desperate apologies, nothing. Maybe she was too ashamed. Maybe she was too afraid. Or maybe she was clinging to some hope that Richard would take her in, only to realize he had been taken down just as swiftly as she had. It didn't matter. She was out of my life. That night, I stood in my house, the one I had built, the one she no longer had any claim to, and I took a deep breath. The rage was gone. The grief, the humiliation, the confusion, it had all burned away. In its place was something I hadn't expected. Freedom. I had been so consumed with chasing success, with building a life for Anna and me, that I had never stopped to ask myself what I really wanted. I had spent years trying to prove I was good enough, that I could give her the life she dreamed of. But now, I didn't have to chase anything for anyone else. For the first time in years, I had a blank slate. I didn't know exactly where I was going next. But one thing was certain, wherever it was, I'd be walking into it alone. And that, finally, felt like a win. Bye-bye.